All right, Dorothy, you would like to do all the intro in that? You're welcome.
All right. Okay. Well, welcome today to this month's program of Farmer Angel Network. Is part of our series this winter to outreach for farm families. Is to promote positive mental health and financial stability for area agribusiness persons. Do you want to go to the next slide, please? Just a few reminders that sharing your experiences helps others learn and to reach out for help or resources. Please only share what you are comfortable with in a public setting. As Elena said, these sessions are recorded and will be posted to public social media sites for the purpose of connecting with others looking for information regarding the agriculture community, positive mental health, and financial development. If at any time the Farmer Angel Network members and or the presenter feel a learner needs additional support or resources, we will reach out and provide those resources post-session. I want to welcome everybody again. My name is Dorothy Harms. My husband Don and I farm near Reedsburg. We had been longtime dairy farmers and have in the recent couple of years transitioned into feeding grass-fed beef. I'm particularly interested in this topic. I find myself at times challenged with sleep, and so I'm really eager to hear what Dave Sprecher has to share with us today. Our speaker, as I said, is Dave Sprecher. He is a lead sleep technologist at Sauk Prairie Healthcare. If you would like a hard copy of the session materials, please contact either Amanda Carew through Sauk County Extension at the number given or at her email, amanda.carew@wisc.edu. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Dave. Just a little bit more about him. He grew up on a family dairy farm in Spring Green, and after graduating from River Valley High School, also I'm a River Valley graduate as well. Hey, go Hawks! In 1991, he chose to go to the route of healthcare. He became an EMT for Spring Green Fire Department, and after working as an ER tech at the UW-ER for 6 years, saw an interest in sleep technology. Dave enrolled and graduated from Madison College, formerly Madison Area Technical College, as a licensed sleep technician. He was hired by and started work at St. Mary's Sleep Center during his clinical rotation. He sat for and passed his registry exam for sleep technologist 18 months later. Dave has continued his employment there for 6 years, and during that time held part-time jobs in sleep labs at Edgerton, Dodgeville, and eventually Sauk Prairie Healthcare. Became the full-time lead sleep technologist in 2007 and earned his certification in clinical sleep health in 2017. So with that, I will turn it over to Dave. Thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you for having me. All right, so let's see if this works here. Can anybody see that?
Yep, so we can see your main, so if you hit from beginning, you'll be able to get the slide started.
Okay. Good.
Perfect.
All right. So thank you again, Dorothy, for a nice intro. Thanks again for everybody having me here. So today I want to talk a little bit about a couple of different topics as far as getting a better night's sleep. I want to address a little bit about sleep apnea, what we do to test for it, different ways to fix it, and then also just some general ways to improve the atmosphere and cultivate a better night's sleep, starting from just being at home. So we'll get started here. So just a quick disclosure statement: I have no financial interest or affiliation concerning material discussed in this presentation, and I will not discuss any non-FDA approved or investigational drugs or medical devices. So everything I'm talking about has been clinically proven and working. I don't talk about anything that is in any kind of research phase. So So I often get the question, why should someone be concerned about their sleep? So many people tell me I don't have a problem sleeping. My head hits the pillow and I immediately fall asleep. Especially folks, like my folks and friends of my family who are also farmers. You guys put in 18 plus hours a day sometimes, and so when your head hits the pillow, you're exhausted. And I kind of chuckle about that. And a small part of our job as sleep techs or in the sleep clinic is whether or not a person is able to fall asleep and maintain sleep. But more so, we're concerned about what happens to a person while they're sleeping. And that's probably 90% of what we do. Unfortunately, in healthcare in general, I think, but what I've seen in my business is there really isn't up-to-date statistics. Research studies kind of stop and end, and then they don't do research studies till many, many years later. But in 2018, the statistics from the American Heart Association showed that obstructive sleep apnea has been associated with many different forms of cardiovascular disease. Adults with obstructive sleep apnea not only have an increased risk of developing cardiovascular disease, but also have worse outcomes when it comes to their cardiovascular disease. So if you don't have your OSA, if you have OSA and it's not treated, you have a higher risk of developing cardiovascular disease. And if you have cardiovascular disease and OSA, your cardiovascular disease is going to end up worse. The obstructive sleep apnea is estimated to affect approximately 34% of men and 17% of women in the general population, and 40 to 60% of patients with known cardiovascular disease. This has increased 30% over the last 20 years, and it's believed to be directly related to the obesity epidemic, as well as our aging population. Also, people tend to ask me, well, what causes obstructive sleep apnea? The quick and simple answer is age, weight, and genetics. And of those three, weight is the only one of the three that we have any direct effect on. We can't, unfortunately, yet we can't take the pill to make ourselves younger, and we can't change our DNA. So those three things will cause a person to have obstructive sleep apnea. So what is sleep and why is it important? The definition of sleep is a natural state of rest in which our eyes are closed and you become unconscious. Our brain is actually really hard at work when we sleep. Our brains never really get a rest. I kind of relate it to when horses sleep, they sleep standing up. It doesn't seem like they're actually resting, but that's how they rest. And our brains are constantly working, repairing neurons and making new connections and sorting out the short-term memories that we had from that day and turning them into long-term memories. We spend about a third of our lives sleeping. So my dad would always say, if you're going to spend that much time doing something, it's worthwhile to do the best job at it that you can. Blood pressure, heart rate, and body temperature also decrease when we're sleeping. And when we sleep, our brain, like I said, is hard at work cleaning up, organizing, and transforming short-term memory to long-term memory. If we don't get enough sleep, every function in our body is affected by our hormones. So from our immune system to our heart. It's especially important with drowsy driving, or in regards to drowsy driving. It's been found that 21% of fatal car accidents are caused from drowsy driving. There's an estimated of over 100,000 car wrecks a year that are just caused from drowsy driving. So it's really important that we do try to get the best amount of sleep. Not only the amount of time, but the time spent is a quality amount of sleep. Sleep occurs in multiple stages. There's 4 main stages of sleep, including dreamless periods of light and deep sleep, where different functions happen during those stages, and occasional periods of active dreaming, otherwise known as REM sleep. The REM sleep, the REM stands for rapid eye movements, and during that stage, when you're having an active dream, on a sleep study, you can actually see a person's eyes rolling under their eyelids. So it is actually rapid eye movements. It's pretty neat to see. As we age, the amount of sleep time remains the same, so we tend to still get between that 6 to 8 hours, but unfortunately, less time is spent in those deeper beneficial stages of sleep, and more time is spent in the lighter lighter stages of sleep. Stage 1 sleep, which is the first stage that a person goes into when they fall asleep, is so light of a stage of sleep that often people don't feel like they're sleeping. It's typically the stage of sleep, going back to the drowsy driving, is typically the stage of sleep that people go into when they fall asleep driving, because they don't realize that they've actually fallen asleep. So a stage of sleep that's that light has really no benefits to health or well-being. It's just the introduction to sleep. And then beyond there, you have stage 2, you have stage 3, which is considered the deep stage of sleep. That's where growth hormones are released into the body for physical repair. REM stage is your 4th stage of sleep. That's your active dreaming stage. That's when your brain gets its mental rehabilitation, is during the active dreaming stage. Sleep is essential for a healthy heart. People who don't sleep enough are at higher risk for cardiovascular disease. And this is regardless to age, weight, smoking, or exercise habits. So that's how important sleep and quality sleep is. One study found that those who slept fewer than 6 hours per night were about twice as likely to have a stroke or heart attack as people who slept 6 to 8 hours per night. So again, it goes back to quantity and quality. We want to make sure you're getting enough sleep, and that sleep that you are getting is as quality as we can make it, or as quality as you can make it. Untreated sleep disorders can cause a multitude of health issues. For example, they can cause, like I said, cardiovascular disease. They can cause hypertension, which is also what high blood pressure is hypertension. And that's because when your body is deprived of oxygen, it puts more pressure on your heart to work, which can cause your blood pressure to raise over time. And that can cause heart disease, cardiac arrhythmias, and strokes. Cardiac arrhythmias, which, as I just mentioned, cardiac arrhythmias are heart rhythm changes. So we have seen, the normal rhythm is what we call normal sinus rhythm. We have seen that rhythm change over time due to untreated sleep disorders. You can eventually then ultimately have the big one, the heart attack. This is where my dad kind of comes into why I was excited. Besides, I love to talk about sleep stuff, but my dad coming up on 8 years ago this year had a massive heart attack. He survived what the cardiovascular docs call the widowmaker. He had one blockage that was 100% blockage and 2 that were 80% blocked. When he went in to one of the heart attacks, he had multiple that day. One of the heart attacks, he said they figured probably happened when he was up in the silo leveling it off. So he was about 70 feet, 100 feet up in the air when he had a heart attack. Had to sit down in the silage to catch his breath and to stop sweating. And when he finally felt well enough, then he climbed down the silo, and of course, in typical farmer nature, went right back to work. And then later that day, he believes one other one, and then the one that sent him to the house, he was just closing a gate on the heifer pen, collapsed to the ground, couldn't stand up. He basically pulled up behind him, pulled the gate closed, chained it, and then crawled to his truck, drove from the farm to the house. And when he came in, he was clutched onto the counter crying. Now, I've seen my dad cry. I think I can count on 5 times when I've seen my dad cry, and that includes a barn fire, a house fire, and the death of both of my grandfathers. But he could not speak. He clearly was having some problems. My son happened to be at their house that day, and he just happened to see a Bayer aspirin commercial that day. He remembered that in the Bayer aspirin commercial, they mentioned about helping for early onset for heart attacks. Mom just happened to have aspirin in the house, and she has no idea where it came from, but they gave him 2 aspirin, which the cardiovascular doc said most likely saved my dad's life. Shortly after everything was all settled and the dust settled, the cardiac doc asked him if he had ever had a sleep study done, and my dad, of course, said no. I knew my dad had sleep apnea for years, but the doc made him come in for a sleep study. Come to find out, my dad had terrible sleep apnea. And so now to this day, my dad is still on a machine. He knows it works for him. Of course, he doesn't like to wear it, as many people don't. But a lot of people say, what we see happen is people say, I don't like to wear it. I don't like to wear a mask at bedtime, but I know that I feel better and sleep better with wearing it. So That's my dad's story of heart attacks and cardiovascular stuff. Untreated sleep apnea can also cause strokes. And then there's a few other things that it can cause as well too. Obviously, daytime drowsiness. If you're not sleeping well enough at nighttime, you're going to be sleepy during the daytime. We talked about hypertension, heart attacks, strokes. It can cause short-term memory loss, directly affiliated with what we call brain fog, where you just have this foggy feeling like you don't really know why you went to the fridge, but you're standing in front of the fridge and it's, I know I think I was hungry, but I don't remember what I came here for. That can cause short-term memory loss, where it's hard for your brain to make those connections and to turn those short-term memories from the day into long-term memories. Over time, it can cause adult onset diabetes because it does create a disruption with your hormones, and diabetes and hormones are directly related. Ultimately, it can cause clinically diagnosed depression because you become tired, significantly tired for long periods of time, and eventually the tiredness and sadness are hard to decipher between the two, and a person then slips into what would be considered sadness and then eventually depression. And again, it all relates to brain fogginess and not feeling refreshed, not sleeping enough at nighttime. Over time, if you're not sleeping well at nighttime and you're getting tired during the daytime, that can offset your circadian rhythm, which we'll talk about here, I believe, in a little bit. Circadian rhythm is your body's internal clock, which tells you when it's time to sleep and time to be awake. And if you, and I see this often with our farming community, because your hours are never set. You're not punching a clock every day. Some days you're getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning, sometimes even earlier to milk the cows, and then yours, and depending on fall time, I know my dad often has to watch the dryer till 1, 2, sometimes 3 o'clock in the morning. So his internal clock is all over the place, and that can lead to insomnia eventually, where your body has a hard time falling asleep because it doesn't know if it's supposed to be awake or sleep. It just loses track of that. And then ultimately, it can take years off the end of your life and create an early death. Again, going back to the cardiovascular disease, heart attacks, strokes, and so on. So what exactly is sleep apnea? Sleep apnea is the disruption to a person's breathing pattern that can pull them out of the stage of sleep they're in and can also cause oxygen loss. Now, the screen here, I don't know if you can see my cursor or over here, where it says normal breathing, the yellow coloring is the airway pattern. The pink is around where the jaw is. That's your tongue and soft palate. So that's soft or smooth muscle tissue. And you can see the arrow is pointed up. That little section right there on the back side of the throat, that is wide open. And that is normal sleep, normal breathing, where the muscles are up and out of the way where they need to stay. Snoring is created when the tongue and the soft palate and smooth muscle tissues relax to the point where they can vibrate. The vibration is created in the upper airway, where you see the red arrow pointing down. But just like a tuba or a trumpet or any other wind instrument, when you make a vibration on one end, it comes out the other end as a noise. So that's where we get our snoring from. When the smooth muscle tissue and the soft palate relax too much and they collapse in on the airway too much or completely, that creates an obstruction to the airway, and that's where the name obstructive sleep apnea comes from, is from that obstruction to the airway. The air cannot pass in and out of the body through the nose or the mouth because there's a blockage right in the upper part of the airway. What then happens is any usable oxygen that is trapped in the body gets used up by the cells as energy, gets converted to carbon dioxide, and we get a CO2 increase or carbon dioxide increase within the body. Our brains, again, are constantly monitoring the system, monitoring all the different systems throughout the body, and when it sees that the oxygen and carbon dioxide levels start to offset, carbon dioxide gets too high and O2 or oxygen gets too low, it goes into emergent mode, and the brain says, hey, wake up, and it jerks you out of the stage of sleep you're in, sometimes to full wakefulness, but often when people get awakened out of an obstructive sleep apnea, you get that loud snort, gasp, choking, like sort of sensation. That rattling, that gurgling, the snoring is the soft muscles or the smooth muscle tissue tensing back up and lifting itself back up out of the way so that you can breathe and pass air. Then you pant a little bit, get some fresh air coming in, blow away some of that carbon dioxide, relax, and then you drift back into sleep. And then you often do that over and over and over again, sometimes upwards of 40, 50, 60 times per hour is what we see in sleep apnea. So that's obstructive sleep apnea. Now, obstructive sleep apnea is the most common form of sleep apnea. There are other types of sleep apnea, but that is the one that people hear of the most. So what tests are done to find out if you have a sleep disorder, and what can you do? The first thing that a person should do whenever they have any concerns about their health should be to talk to your primary care provider, talk to your doctor, or you can schedule a sleep medicine clinic appointment. Now, our sleep clinic here at Sauk Prairie Healthcare, we do not require a physician's referral. We allow patients to self-refer into the clinic. So basically, a patient can call our clinic and say, yeah, I have some concerns about my sleep. I'd like to be seen by your sleep specialist. And we can go ahead and schedule that right there on the spot. We don't require that you see a primary care doctor first. The test that, or then the patients come in, they speak to the sleep specialist or sleep provider. The provider determines if a test is warranted, if it's definitely worthwhile looking into. And then at that point, they would determine which type of test would be the most appropriate test to order for this patient. The gold standard of testing is what's called a polysomnogram, or it is an in-lab sleep study. The polysomnogram looks at 16 different sensors or 16 different channels of information at the same time. And it's looking at the full picture, the big picture of sleep apnea. That would include sleep apnea, restless leg syndrome, periodic limb movement disorder, any kind of possible like nighttime seizures and things can be done from a polysomnogram. So it looks at the big picture. That test is done in a sleep center or sleep lab. There is another test called a home sleep apnea test or home sleep test, which is an abbreviated version of that in-lab sleep study. And what it's looking at is 4 channels of information. It's looking basically at the respiratory related signals that are related to sleep apnea. And the home sleep test is a wonderful test to diagnose someone with obstructive sleep apnea. Unfortunately, because it's not looking at the whole picture, we cannot use that test to rule out sleep apnea. So in other words, we can't say that a person doesn't have sleep apnea because we don't know. It could be a type of sleep apnea that's not identified on the home test because of the not looking at certain signals and sensors that we need to identify those forms of apnea. But we can certainly use it to prove a person does have sleep apnea. And we do a considerable amount of home tests. They are done in the home. It's a kit that the patient takes home with them, does it in their own home environment, and then brings a kit back to us. We upload it to the system, and then we diagnose it from there. So now what treatments are available for sleep apnea? So if a person finds out they have sleep apnea, what can we do to fix it? Well, the gold standard for treating sleep apnea always has been and always will be a PAP machine. PAP stands for positive airway pressure. And then there are different types of PAP machines. The most common one that people know of is CPAP. And I'm certain that probably everyone here today knows at least one person who's on a CPAP machine. How they work is they sit at the bedside. They draw room air in through the back of the machine. The room air is then pressurized. Typically from there, then it passes through a heated humidification chamber to pick up some moisture because the dry air can be pretty uncomfortable for most patients. So it picks up some moisture and then it travels through a 6-foot long tube into a mask. Then the mask is held in place on your face, either on your nose or over the nose and mouth by a headgear. And you're breathing in and with that machine. Now, this is not like an air compressor, like what you'd use to pump your tires up with. This is a positive air pressure. So what it does is it uses a little bit of air pressure in a perfectly sealed environment to create a lot of expansion. And so we're basically creating an air stent with this device. Whereas like, a cardiac stent, for example, is something that holds your arteries and veins open. The CPAP machine creates an air stent, which is used to hold the upper airway open, keep those muscles up and out of the way so that airway stays open and free to move air. And because it's not like constant air pressure like what you get from a fan or air compressor, you are able to exhale or breathe out against this incoming air. So they're quite comfortable. I know all of us sleep techs try them out all the time. So now CPAP doesn't work for, there's about 2% of the population that CPAP doesn't work for. We usually try to encourage people to try the CPAP device, try it, go try a few different masks before they officially give up. Because again, it is a gold standard of treatment. Something that is relatively new on the market, I'd say probably within the last 6 years, 6 to 8 years, is what's called an oral appliance or jaw advancement device. And what this is, it's a hard resin or hard plastic device that is created by a sleep certified dentist. How it works is the upper jaw or the upper teeth are attached to the jaw, which is attached to the skull, so that's not movable, but the lower jaw is movable. You can move that around. And the tongue is attached to the lower jaw. So what this device does is it kind of helps to hold the lower teeth and lower jaw forward. And then the tongue is then held forward away from the back side of the airway, which can then increase the size of the airway a few millimeters. In certain patients, a few millimeters is all they need to improve their sleep apnea. Now, this device is not considered a gold standard treatment because it has not been clinically proven to completely eliminate sleep apnea with use. It has been proven to improve sleep apnea. And therefore, some insurance companies will not pay for this device. So it's something that's, if a person tried CPAP and they're not able to tolerate, just cannot tolerate it, we've exhausted all resources. And we send the patient to a referral to a sleep certified dentist. The dentist does their examination of the mouth to make sure they have teeth in the right places to anchor this in. Then they need to find out if the insurance company will cover it. So we don't work with the oral appliances very often because there's really no adjustments to them. That's all done through the dentist. But they basically, like I said, the top part that snaps onto the upper teeth helps to hold the lower jaw in place by connection, as you can kind of see from the picture in the front there. There's lots and lots of different types of these devices, but they all work basically the same. And another form of a little more conservative type therapy would be what we call positional therapy. Now, positional therapy, what it is basically keeping your body out of a position that would increase sleep apnea. So sleep apnea tends to be worse when people sleep on their back. And positional therapy is different ways to keep you off your back or reposition that airway. You can see some tennis balls there. And one of the cheapest, easiest ways to do this is to wear a t-shirt to bed, grab a tennis ball and a rubber band that into the upper part of the back part of the t-shirt, so that if you were to roll onto your back, that position then becomes uncomfortable after a little while and you will roll off that position. We recommend that people try that for 2 to 3 weeks and then take the tennis ball out and see how you do. See if you're able to stay off your back at nighttime. If the tennis ball doesn't work, then moving to the right of that, there are devices that can be purchased on the internet that more like a bumper to prevent you from being able to roll onto your back. Something else that we also do sometimes try below that picture, the lady in the pink shirt sleeping on what's called a wedge pillow. That's to slightly elevate the upper half or upper part of your body, your torso. Again, that's more repositioning the shape or where the airway is. So instead of it being flat, it's sort of angled a little bit, and that way the muscle structures can't fall against the back side of the airway. They'll kind of fall down and then keep the airway open just a little bit so you can continue breathing. So all these, and we do sometimes on occasion have to combine therapies. It's not all that uncommon for us to prescribe CPAP for a patient, but then tell them they need to stay off their back. We find this in our patients that tend to have the higher body mass indexes, our obese, morbidly obese patients. We sometimes have to have them stay off their back and use CPAP as well until they get feeling better and the sleep apnea is treated and they have the energy to take that extra walk in the day, or diets and exercises start to work for them instead of work against them. So. And then here's some 10 tips for great sleep hygiene. Now, sleep hygiene is different things that a person can do to improve their night of sleep. And not all of these would apply to everyone, but, and I did supply, I think it was, it's actually 12, a list of 12 things to improve sleep hygiene. So you can get that from the folks there if you want a copy of this. But the first thing is to maintain a regular bedtime and wake time. This kind of goes along with the circadian rhythm again. Again, the circadian rhythm is our body's internal clock that tells us when it's time to eat, or sorry, time to wake up, time to go to bed. It can even tell us when it's time to go to the bathroom. If you notice, we kind of tend to go to the bathroom about the same times every day. It's very, very important that we maintain a regular bedtime and wake up time because it keeps that clock in check. It keeps it so that it's always set at the right time, basically. Establish a regular relaxing bedtime routine. This may include, but not limited to, a warm bath or shower 1-2 hours prior to bedtime, possibly a nice massage from a loved one, or self-massage, if you can massage your shoulders at nighttime, different things that you would expect to be relaxing. Now that's not going home and sitting for 3 or 4 hours playing your PlayStation, or sitting on your tablet in bed or your laptop in bed watching a movie or Netflix. These would be things that would tend to make a person bored or tend to make a person fall asleep. So we want to try to create that relaxing routine because our bodies and our brains work very much on routine. And so when that way, say for example, you decide to take a warm bath a couple hours before bedtime every single night, when you're running that bath water and you get into that bath, your brain is going to say, oh, this is that bath. It must be time to start going to sleep. That triggers a response in your brain to release your sleepy time hormones, your melatonins, your serotonins, and that starts that sleep process. Make your room dark, cool, and quiet. They recommend, a researcher put out an article here about a couple months ago or so that said that they recommend that the bedroom temperature be between 60 and 67 degrees, with 65 being the ideal temperature. Again, your core body temperature needs to be able to drop about 3 degrees in order for your circadian rhythm to reset itself. Your circadian clock or your circadian rhythm resets itself every 12 hours, usually between 3 and 5 o'clock p.m. and 3 and 5 o'clock a.m. And you can tell that your circadian clock is resetting itself. If you ever kind of recognize that between 3 and 5 o'clock, maybe you get a little bit sleepy, kind of maybe get a little bit of a chill, that's your circadian clock resetting itself. The same thing happens between 3 and 5 a.m. And so it's important that you keep your room on the cooler side so that you allow that to happen. Often we see patients that sleep with multiple blankets on the beds. We actually once had a patient that came in and slept with 8 blankets on the bed because she just always felt cold. It's really, really important that you peel a few of those away to allow that circadian rhythm to reset. Create a sleepy environment. So that kind of goes along with keeping the tablets, the laptops, the iPads, the smartphones, the TVs, all of that out of the bedroom. We want the bedroom to be for sleep. Make it so that when you walk into that bedroom, your brain, your eyes see the bedroom, it sends the signal to the brain, oh, this is where we sleep. And then again, it kind of creates that sleepy time release of serotonin, melatonin, and kind of helps to start that process. Keep the laptops and the TVs out in the family room or other areas of the house. Avoid caffeine within 5 to 6 hours of bedtime. A lot of people don't realize this, but caffeine doesn't affect you immediately after drinking it or taking it or eating it. Caffeine has a half-life and it can last up to 5 to 6 hours. So we want to make sure you cut out the caffeine within 5 to 6 hours of bedtime. Caffeine, as we all know, is a stimulant. Hopefully nobody smokes, but avoid nicotine and alcohol 2 to 3 hours before bedtime. Nicotine, again, is also a stimulant, so it can create that energy or energize and can kind of mess up your brain waves while you're sleeping. Alcohol is kind of a funny one. So many moons ago, having a nightcap used to be a very popular thing, and people did that to kind of help relax and help them fall asleep. Alcohol will help you to initiate sleep, but as your body processes alcohol, it actually contains sugars, and sugars are a stimulant, and so it will disrupt your sleep throughout the night until it's all burned up or till it's all been metabolized. So we do recommend cutting out alcohol 2 to 3 hours before bedtime, nicotine 2 to 3 hours before bedtime, and again, caffeine 5 to 6 hours before bedtime. Do not nap during the daytime if possible. Napping during the daytime does take sleep away from the night. However, if you must nap, we recommend for 20 minutes or less if absolutely needed. So if you get to that point where you feel like you're walking through wet cement, or you don't feel like you can function the rest of the day, take a 20-minute nap, get your refreshment, feel better. But then we do highly recommend at that point that you consider coming into the sleep clinic or a sleep clinic elsewhere, and talk to a sleep specialist, because napping during the daytime, there is some current research going on, and I was going to include it into my talk today, but I haven't found really any conclusive data on it yet. So you may see that. Yeah, if you attend one of my talks again in the future, you may see the slide change a bit, but right now there's thought that naps during the daytime may not be as bad as what we once thought. Again, I haven't seen the conclusive data from the research, so I don't want to change this just yet, but right now we're recommending 20 minutes or less if you absolutely need to. Get into bed only when sleepy. This kind of goes along with those folks that sit in bed and ruminate and think about their thoughts all night long, and they stare at the ceiling. So you should only want to get into bed when you're sleepy. Don't get into bed just because it's 9 o'clock and that's bedtime. If you're not tired, don't get into bed, because otherwise you're just going to be feeding into that lying in bed staring at the ceiling. Lay in bed only for the purpose of falling asleep. So again, if you're lying in bed and you're not falling asleep, and without being a clock watcher, if it feels like it's been quite a long time, get out of bed, go somewhere, a different room where you have maybe a dimly lit light or lamp, and read a magazine, read a book. Don't turn on devices like your phone, your laptop, your iPads and things like that. But just read a book or read a magazine or newspaper, just something to help get you tired again, to make you bored again, and then go back to bed and try it again a little bit later. Schedule a worry time during the late afternoon. This is something for those folks that do lie in bed and cannot shut down their thoughts. Their brain just keeps running. And so if you have those times where your brain just runs from on a loop from one thing to the next thing to the next thing to the next thing, what I recommend, or what we recommend, is what's called a worry time. Worry time is a separate place from your bedroom, maybe from the living room. It may not even be in your house. It may be in the backyard, or somewhere in the barn. Just someplace away from any distractions, where you can take a pad of paper and pen and start writing down all of those thoughts that kept you awake the night before, and then try to come up with solutions to them, or any other thoughts that may come to mind while you're in your worry time place or your worry place. Write down those thoughts, try to come up with solutions to them, so that hopefully when you go to bed that night, those thoughts aren't going to enter the brain, because you've already come up with solutions for them. You may have other thoughts that enter in there, and so log them, say, okay, I'll save you for tomorrow for the worry time. And when you get into your worry time space, write those thoughts down. And after a while, it will start to help. You'll start to say, okay, rather than worry about this right now, I'll just remember this for tomorrow, and you pass it on. And the next one comes in, nope, remember that for tomorrow, pass it on. And then when you go to your worry time place, write it down, come up with a solution to the problem, or thoughts of that problem. And then the idea behind it is, once you come up with a solution, it shouldn't affect you. This does work. I've done this myself. It sounds kind of hokey, but it does work. So, and then last, I want to leave you with this one. I found this on the internet as well too. So for all my gaming friends out there, level of exhaustion, dairy farmer. So that's all I have.
Is there anybody that has any questions they want to address to Dave, or either turn their mute off or else in the chat?
Very nice, Dave. I have a couple questions for you.
Sure.
First, I like that picture. We recently visited a farm, a neighbor farmer, and had to walk out into the field to find this person, only to find them sleeping beside the, I can't remember what equipment they were using that day, if they were disking, or I can't remember. They were taking a nap out on the field.
Yeah, that was one of the other pictures I was trying to decide between. I saw when they were leaned up against the tire of a big stagger tractor, and I thought, well, I like the dairy farmer one. So
I recently saw, I think it was an advertisement about a tiny little contraption that seemed to be being promoted as a CPAP. Are devices being developed that are more comfortable?
okay, so two-part answer to that one.
Okay.
So the device you're talking about, there is a mini, and I don't even know if you'd call it even mini, whatever the word is that's smaller than mini. It's basically a CPAP machine that sticks onto your nose, or basically you wear it right here. I'll kind of take a half step backwards. The gold standard for treating sleep apnea, like I said, is a CPAP machine with a mask. Always has been, always will be. Our conference, our national conference, occurs in June of every year. The American Academy of Sleep Medicine and the Board of Registered Polysomnographic Technologists has their conference every year, different places throughout the United States. And it seems like usually right around April and May, you start seeing these new devices come out because they want to have a booth at the conference. And then after the conference is done, they sort of disappear because they don't really work. So I know the device, I believe I know the device you're talking about. It is only a CPAP machine. It is only capable of delivering certain amounts of air pressure because the pump just isn't big enough. So if a person is, I think it's able to deliver between like 4 and maybe 10, whereas the regular CPAP machine goes 4 to 20. So depending on the person's severity, they claimed that device would work. I have never seen it in use. I've seen it just advertised like you did. So anyway, then to the other part of it, are devices being developed that are more comfortable? There are devices being developed all the time. New masks are being developed all the time that are more and more comfortable. The silicone that's used in the cushions nowadays for our masks is a new blend of silicone, which is much, much softer. It's almost baby butt soft. I mean, they're just soft, cushiony, pillowy feeling. The downside to that is they do wear out a lot faster. You have to replace them every 30 days, but they're much, much softer. So the masks themselves are a lot more comfortable. The styles of masks that they have are a lot more comfortable. And there is, for certain patients who fit any pre-existing stuff, there is an implantable device for those that really cannot tolerate CPAP, but really do need it. There's an implantable device that basically it is turned on with a switch, and it sends a very, very, very small electrical signal to the backside of your tongue, which makes your tongue rigid and doesn't allow the muscles to fall back in because they're now rigid. And it does work, but right, and it's FDA approved. It's called an Inspire. Our medical director is through Gunderson Health Systems in La Crosse, and their surgeons up there, they implant the Inspire all the time. We have actually sent some of our patients there who just could not tolerate CPAP. We send them up to La Crosse for an evaluation. They unfortunately were not qualifiable for the Inspire because the qualifications for it per the FDA is such a narrow margin right now that not very many people do qualify for it. But as more and more research is done on the Inspire, I foresee that group expanding out further and further, and more people would qualify for that. So hopefully that answered your question.
Yes, yeah.
I have a question here through chat. What are my thoughts on the SoClean machines for cleaning your sleep apnea equipment and machines? So I have, we get this question. That is the $1 million question. Thank you, Tracy, for putting that in there. The SoClean device is an ozone generator. So it cleans by generating ozone, pumping the ozone through the circuit, which would be the mask, the hose, and the machine, and then back into the SoClean device. We do not recommend it. We'd recommend just good old fashioned Blue Dawn dish soap and warm soapy water and just clean your equipment the old fashioned way. What this SoClean device can do, first and foremost, if you use a SoClean device on your equipment, it'll void the warranty of your machine. Because, and they can tell that a SoClean device was used because the ozone makes the inside of the machine yellow, kind of like that off-white yellow, and they can tell. Also, all the components on the inside of the machine turn yellow because of it. So if the machine were to break and they need to send it in for warranty work, the warranty would be voided. They would open it up and be able to tell. So we don't recommend it for that main purpose right there. Secondly, it is generating ozone. Now the FDA has made a statement that the SoClean devices are considered perfectly healthy for in-home use. But they followed that statement up with, however, these SoClean devices are not producing enough ozone to be considered unhealthy, and they're also not producing enough ozone to be considered useful. So in other words, in order for the SoClean to produce enough ozone to really clean your equipment the way they intended it to, it would be producing enough that it would be unhealthy to have in the home. So I hope that answers your question on the SoClean. We don't recommend them, but they're, it's your $250. So let's see. So next question, what are your thoughts about taking melatonin supplements and or lavender essential oils to aid with sleep? Great question, Dorothy. So we do recommend, well, I shouldn't say we recommend. I recommend melatonin and supplements and everything under the direction of your provider or sleep provider or your primary care provider. Even though the melatonin and the lavender and that are over-the-counter stuff, I would recommend talking to them first about it, because it's really important that the melatonin is used the right way to get the full benefits out of it. Quite often people will take their melatonin, hop into bed and try to fall asleep, and they're laying there awake and they don't know why they're not falling asleep. I just took my melatonin. Melatonin doesn't work that way. Melatonin needs to be taken an hour to 2 hours before your intended bedtime. And so taking it immediately before going into bed, you're going to feel the effects of the melatonin much later when you're already probably sleeping. Lavender and things like that, supplemental or not supplement, essential oils. My girlfriend uses a lot of essential oils, and they work. They work for some, they may not work for others. So if you're into essential oils, use them. They, like I said, lavender is very well known to help relax people. Chamomile is another one that helps, is very relaxing. So whatever it takes to create that sleepy routine, that bedtime routine, feel free to do so. With the melatonin, like I said, it's really do your research on it and really learn how it's intended to be used to see if it's the right aid for you. If melatonin works for some people, and other people it doesn't really work that well for. With it being kind of an over-the-counter supplement, the FDA doesn't regulate it, so they're really on the back of the instructions, it's not going to say take 2 of these and call me in the morning. It's going to say take anywhere between 1 and 3, and that's kind of for you to decide what works for you. And like I said, really do your research on how it's intended to be used. But yeah, I mean, here in our lab for the sleep patients, and this is because they're here for a sleep study. If a patient's not sleeping, we do recommend that if a patient feels that they're not going to be able to sleep well for their study, that they have their primary care provider write a prescription of Ambien. They bring it in with them as a prescribed med, and then we start the night out without the Ambien on board or in them. And if they're not able to fall asleep or maintain sleep after an hour, then we let them take their Ambien. But Ambien is an entirely different medication from melatonin. It has a 12 to 20 minute onset, so it works very quickly. But then, in the past, Ambien has had some pretty negative news articles written about it. So again, it's all in the appropriate use of it. But let's see. Oh, thanks, Chris, for coming in. Appreciate it. Any other questions?
Dave, I just have a thought.
Sure.
I was a patient and did have a sleep study there at one point, and I found it very interesting that the over-the-counter meds I was taking, thinking they were helping me sleep, were actually disrupting my sleep. So it was actually, it was a very easy change for me to make. Um, and just by stopping some over-the-counter things, I was able to get a better night's sleep.
Sure. Yeah, it's really kind of fascinating. What we think we're doing for ourselves is helpful, in some cases can actually be harmful. And even though these meds are over the counter, I highly recommend you still talk to your primary care provider before taking them. Even some supplements. Many years ago, when supplements really started to take off, a lot of people didn't realize that there's actually a warning came out. Now, I'm an EMT, like I said like Dorothy said in the introduction, and they warned us that St. John's root or St. John's wort is an antidepressant. And so people that are taking an antidepressant and then adding that as a supplement that they can buy over the counter, they're actually double dosing their antidepressants. And so that can cause problems. And so it's really, really important that you understand what it is you're taking, even if it's over the counter. Do your research before you decide to take it, because what may help one person may harm another, or may harm another's sleep. So.
Dave, I do have one question, Dave.
Sure.
When it comes to, the farming community, a lot of times farmers are up really, really early in the morning, or, going to bed really, really late, or they're getting up in the middle of the night to go check cows that might be calving, or lambs, or whatever might be going on their farm. What is the best way in a scenario like that where, you've got calving season, or you're planting and harvesting and you're having those late hours, early mornings, whatever it might be, their schedules can fluctuate a lot. You're talking about the circadian rhythm, but what about in a situation on a farm where some of those type of situations change seasonally?
Yeah, great question, Elena. And that is so true. And that is, farming is, I'm preaching to the choir here. Farming is, listed in the top 5 of, the most dangerous jobs in America. And part of that danger is just the long, crazy, erratic hours that farmers put in. There isn't a great case scenario or a great answer to answer that, because with farming, so for example, with farming, it's not a job, it's a lifestyle. You get up, you go pull that calf because you have to. You get up at 2 a.m, or if you have a calf calving, tonight you might be up till 1, 2 o'clock in the morning, but tomorrow night you get to be in at 8, 9 o'clock when you're done with milking. And then the next day, all of a sudden, no, it's harvest season. Now you're getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning or 3 o'clock in the morning to go milk cows so you can get out to the field a lot earlier. And then you're out to the field until 10, 11, 12, 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. You're all over the board. It is so hard for a farmer to maintain their circadian rhythm just because of their schedule. And to be honest with you, like I said, there really isn't a great answer to that, because it's something that you have to do. You have to. No one else is going to do it. Now versus someone in my position or someone who punches a clock, typically when you work an hourly job, you come to work, you punch the clock, when you're done, and you're done. You don't have to think about work anymore. You get to go home, and have a couple cocktails, have a couple Bud Lights, make supper, grill out, go on a vacation. Farmers don't get that opportunity. They just can't. So long explanation for a short question. There isn't a great answer to that. And I say do the best that they can around the days of those odd days to try to maintain a regular schedule. So if you look at a 7-night week, out of those 7 nights, I typically would, and if I was still working, so farming. So, okay, so we get done milking, at 6 o'clock, done, home and in bed on a normal night by 7 o'clock, or when you're done, let's say you're in the house every night by 9 o'clock, you watch a little bit of news, eat some supper, and you're in bed by 9:30. If that's your normal routine, then around those nights where you have to get up at 1, 2 o'clock to go pull a calf, or you have some pigs farrowing, or whatever have you, those oddball nights, just push them aside so that your regular scheduled nights, you're trying to go to bed about the same time, get up around the same time. That's the best that you can do as a farmer, is just try to keep it normal, because you know you're going to have those abnormal nights.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Sure.
So how detrimental is it, say, when Brad goes to bed at 9:30 and is, sound asleep, and then if I don't go to bed till 10:30 or 11, and just the commotion, then he kind of comes out of his sleep, depending what stage of sleep he's in, that probably really goofs up his system, correct?
To a point, yes. A lot of it has to do, and thank you for your question, Kim. So a lot of it has to do with your bedtime routine, since he's already in bed. Are you coming into the room like a bull in a china shop, flipping the lights on, making all kinds of rackets and noise and, all that kind of stuff? Or are you coming in, do you have a night light in the room with enough light for you to see what you're doing, and you come in and you're quiet and you're, a little more church mouse like, and kind of just slide into bed and go to sleep. A large loud disruption is going to pull him out of the stage of sleep a lot further, and a lot more than a slight little nudge would be. When people do have that offset sleep time, we just highly recommend, like I said, put a night light in the room that's dim enough for him to be able to fall asleep, but enough light for you to be able to see by. We also, on a side note, recommend if you get up for bathroom breaks in the night, you don't flip on those bathroom lights, put a night light in the bathroom so it's enough light for you to see what you're doing, so that you can, and in the hallway, so that you can make your way safely to the bed, from the bedroom to the bathroom and then back again, without flipping on the big bright overhead lights, because those bright overhead lights will then, your eyes see that sparks your brain to say, oh, hey, it's daytime. All right, let's go make some breakfast. Let's go milk the cows or whatever we have to do. It starts your circadian rhythm working at that point. So when you climb into bed and your husband is already asleep, climb in, try to be quiet, try to be gentle, try not to make a lot of noise, keep the lights off, use night lights, try to just, gently climb into bed. You're most likely going to wake him up a little bit. Brain waves wise, sleep study wise, you are most likely going to pull him out of the stage of sleep a little bit. But if it's gentle enough, he'll slip right back into the stage that he was in.
Okay. Yeah, the sad thing is the nightlight is the TV that was on when he fell asleep.
So that's another topic. Turn the TVs off. It is so hard to break that habit. I was in that habit for many, many years. And because, you just, especially when I lived at home on the farm, because, you're so tired, you got to come in, your time is so allocated, you're out working all day, you come in, you have just enough energy, just enough time to eat supper, but you still want to watch little TV. So you do it in the bedroom and you fall asleep to it. I highly recommend fans. When I was a nighttime tech and working daytime, and I don't work overtime here, but working daytime, I had an old rusty box barn fan that it loud, but it blocked out the kids. And the way the fans work is they block out any noise that's less than the fan. And so your brain hears that. It's a monotone noise. And the brain hears that, gets bored with it, and blocks it out. Then it also blocks out anything that's quieter than the fan. So with TVs, just like we don't talk in monotone. Our voices go up and down, our voices fluctuate, and that keeps your brain engaged and listening to what's happening. So if you sleep with the TV on, you're not truly resting. Mm-hmm. So breaking the TV habit is tough, but it's something that really, really should be done. And you might find, unless you turn the TV off when you go to bed, but he might find that he feels a lot more rested just from turning the TV off.
That's a good suggestion.
Yep. In our sleep studies, we actually turn the TV off 15 minutes prior to the start of a study, because you want to give your brain that disconnect from daytime to nighttime. So,
thank you.
You're welcome.
Do have one more question if there's time.
I'm free. I don't know about you guys, but
Time. Okay. Actually, Kim made me think of this one. So asking for a farmer I know that lives in the same house. Um, how disruptive is it to your system and your sleep to fall asleep in the chair in the living room for an hour and a half before you go to bed when everybody else is, still doing things?
yeah, it's extremely disruptive because you've now basically created two sleep sessions. You get that hour and a half nap before bed,
Right.
then you get up, you go brush your teeth, you change clothes, you climb into bed, and a lot of people find it difficult to fall asleep. Now, the conversely of that, if you don't find it difficult to fall asleep after all that, then you probably have a sleep problem. You should go see a sleep specialist because normal sleepers would find that very disruptive to be able to fall back to sleep. What we recommend for people is try to figure out, or for the family members, try to figure out about the time that they're falling asleep, and go to bed. Listen to your body. When you're tired and you're yawning and you're laying there and you're sitting there trying to watch TV because you want to watch that movie and you're rubbing your eyes, and by God, I'm going to watch the rest of this movie, or the news. I got to watch the news to see what the weather's going to do tomorrow. The weather's going to come no matter what. And, they play the weather throughout on the radio first thing in the morning. And I know my dad had the markets and the weather on, all night long, which again is another topic. But anyway, but if you start to feel tired, get up and go to bed. Your body is telling you it's time to go to bed. And that's your circadian rhythm saying, dude, I'm ready. I'm telling you, it's time for bed. Listen to me. When you fight through that, and you fight past that, then that's when a lot of times we see the insomnia, because you've now missed that first opportunity to go to sleep and fall asleep. Now, if you do, you're going to go to bed and lay there because you're not as tired as you were before. So we often see that happen. So my suggestion would be, if he typically eats supper, sits down about 9 o'clock and falls asleep by 9:03, I think it's time, maybe try to eat supper. If he can, try to eat supper a little bit earlier, and then be in bed by 9 o'clock. And he might find that he feels a lot more rested just by listening to his body, listening to his circadian rhythm.
I never would have realized that there's that rhythm, and you said it resets twice a day.
Yeah, I didn't know that until I went to sleep school. So, but as soon as our teacher told us, well, do you ever feel tired? Usually around 3 to 5 o'clock. I'm like, yeah, that's your circadian clock resetting itself. It's on a 12-hour cycle, and every 12 hours it resets. And when it resets, your core temperature drops 3 degrees. You tend to get a little bit sleepy, maybe shiver a little bit. That's your internal clock resetting itself. So it's pretty interesting. And then, like I said, the same thing happens between 3 and 5 a.m. And we see that in sleep studies as sleep techs, because if the room is a little bit on the cooler side, quite often patients might even wake up during that and ask for a blanket. So it's best to have a blanket there or ready for them to pull up a little bit. But yeah, the slide I had on the recommended room temperatures, I just found that here just a few months ago. So now we try to keep the rooms a little bit on the cooler side.
Yeah, I'm one that needs to be warm when I go to bed, so my electric blanket is on.
Yeah.
But I turn it off and then get in, and so I suppose then, things cool down a little.
Some people find, and I don't find this, but like, for example, the Sleep Number beds, they have the foot warming features, and some people find that they fall asleep better or easier when their feet are kept warm. I'm not one of those. I'm hot-blooded, so I'm one that kicks a leg out and has a window open during the wintertime and everything. But if you might try maybe putting your heated blanket closer to your feet and warming yourself up that way. And then if you have a timer, turn it off, after an hour or two, so that you let it run just for an hour or two, and then let it turn itself off after you're asleep.
Yeah, I like to be cozy.
Yeah, so does my girlfriend. Usually right here because I'm a heat generator. So.
But is that rhythm, that circadian rhythm, is that the same for all people between the 3 and 5 o'clock?
Yep, it is.
Really?
And the funny thing is it's now it is typically the same. They've through research they have found that it's the same even if you're a shift worker. that shift workers who
That's-
work second and third shift still have their circadian rhythms reset between 3 and 5 o'clock a.m. and 3 and 5 o'clock p.m. So that's just another level of why shift work, even though people have to do it, is incredibly unhealthy because you're fighting that circadian rhythm.
Interesting.
All right, is there any final questions for Dave? Well, thank you very much. I think you shared a wealth of knowledge with us today, Dave. We really appreciate that. Maybe
Yeah,
just give you a
absolutely.
little hand here.
Thank you. If you have any other questions, I'm here at the Sauk Sleep Center here Monday through Friday, 8 to 4. Feel free to give me a call or contact me through the Farmers Network, the Farmer Angel Network. Either way, I'm here to, as a sleep educator, this is actually something I love to do. This is really true to my heart, is giving these talks and stuff. So just give me a call.
All right.
Dave.
And just as a reminder, this was recorded today. Maybe a couple of you have your spouse wasn't with you today. You could let them listen to it at a later time to kind of share some of the information today. But it will be posted with a link to the Farmer Angel Network Facebook page, likely by next week. So it will be available then. So this concludes our series of winter educational programs. I'd like to invite you to kind of, always be checking with Farmer Angel Network's Facebook page. We are planning a family fun event for this early summer. I don't have an exact date yet, but we are working, collaborating with Richland County and planning a family fun movie night at the Starlight Drive-In Theater. So just be kind of listening for that. And again, thank you very much, everybody, for joining us.